Hello everyone. Today we'll cover the topic on arbitration and conciliation. The moment we talk about the arbitration or conciliation, the concern is instead of burdening the court of law for every dispute, we're looking to create a parallel mechanism. So in this parallel mechanism, we talk about these arbitrations or conciliation wherein we're talking about the mediation technique. So instead of going to the court, we refer a neutral third party who decide the matter in an informal manner. But still, these matters, these decisions, these proceedings have a equivalent value as those the decisions given by the any civil court. So here we'll see the Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 1996 with a view to consolidate and amend the laws relating to domestic arbitration, international commercial arbitration, enforcement of foreign arbitral award, and also to provide for a law relating to conciliation and the related matters. A new law which is called as the Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 1996 has been passed. Because as we are seeing, we are looking for a lot of things wherein we can handle the matters in a more informal manner. Instead of referring to the court of law, we try to handle matter at the domestic level. So we're talking about the local arbitrations or the international arbitrations or enforcing any of the foreign arbitral awards. We would need certain laws, we would need certain mechanism. So we had this Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 1996. This new law is based on the United Nations Commission on the International Trade Law. Generally, we see whenever we're talking about these international treaties and conventions, whosoever are the participating countries or the signatory countries, they have obligations. Obviously, as a participating country, the obligation is only moral. But when it's a signatory country, the obligation is more on a legal front. So you need to adapt to the treaties and convention with your local laws. So here this Arbitration Conciliation Act is also based on the UNCITRAL models on the international commercial arbitrations. So we're looking to be in line with those international commercial arbitration standards and the rules. With passage of time, some difficulties in the applicability of the Arbitration and Conciliation of 1996 was noticed. Interpretation of the provision of the Act by courts in some of the cases have resulted in delay of the disposal of arbitration proceedings. An increase in interference of courts in the arbitration matters. Since we have got a provision of court interference in the arbitration also, it was felt that there was too much of interference by the court, and because of this, ultimately the matters were delayed unnecessarily. The matters could not be disposed of, which tend to defeat the object of the act, because the sole purpose of having this act was to lower the burden of the court and minimize the interference of the court in any of these disputes. With a view to overcome these difficulties, the Arbitration and Conciliation Amendment Act of 2015 was passed. Alternative dispute mechanism, especially arbitration, for settlement of dispute is more user-friendly, cost-effective, expeditious, and is committed to improve the legal framework to obviate in disposal of cases. So here if I'm talking about this amendment, we are focusing more on giving something which is more of a user-friendly, something which is more cost-effective. We're looking to work on a settlement of dispute mode which will be expeditious and effective to dispose of the matters, because ultimately if I'm talking about any of the commercial matters, disputes are bound to be there. Every now and then we have a lot of disputes among the parties. So how do they handle that? In a most cost-effective and expeditious manner. What is an arbitration agreement? So here the section 7, section 2, subsection 1b under section 7 says, the arbitration agreement has been defined to mean an agreement by the parties to submit to arbitration all or certain disputes which have arisen or which may arise between them in respect of a defined legal relationship, whether it's contractual or not. Many times, if I'm talking about the practice we witness around us, as a practice, almost all the commercial agreements have a clause of arbitration. So wherever there are any disputes which might arise in future, because at the time of signing the contract, parties practically have got no dispute. They agree mutually, so only they're getting into a contract. But at the time of signing the contract only, they always have a clause of arbitration. This is a general standard practice of industry. So almost all the commercial contracts have, revenue contracts have a clause of arbitration. So in case there is a dispute which will arise in future, how will they settle the matter? How will they appoint an arbitrator? Will they have a single arbitrator or they will have multiple arbitrators? Because normally if I'm appointing an arbitrator, it has to be an odd number. Even number cannot decide any majority. Then we'll see what are the powers to refer parties to arbitration, where there is an arbitration agreement already in place. So here the section 8 subsection 1 says that a judicial authority before which an action is brought in a matter which is the subject of an arbitration agreement shall, if a party to the arbitration agreement or any person claiming through or under him so applies, not later than the date of submitting his first statement on substance of dispute, then notwithstanding any judgment, decree or order the Supreme Court or any other court refers the party to arbitration unless it finds that prima facie no valid arbitration agreement exists. Supposedly some of the matters, a matter has been referred to a court authority to handle a dispute, and wherever the authority feels that maybe prima facie there is no arbitration agreement, there is absolutely nothing which exists between the parties, but still it can always refer the matter. It can always refer as the parties to handle the matter with the arbitrator. Then there are certain provisions about the measures by the court. So here the section 9 subsection 1 says that a party may, before or during the arbitral proceedings or any time after making of the arbitral award, but before it is enforced, as per the sections 36, apply to a court. First of all, what all parties can do? Supposedly, both the parties have referred the matter to an arbitrator and the arbitration proceedings are going on. So any time before the proceedings, after the proceedings, or maybe award has been given, but award has already been given, it has not been enforced, they can always apply to a court for appointment of a guardian for a minor or a person of unsound mind for the purpose of these proceedings. Supposedly I am dealing with a minor or I am dealing with somebody who is of an unsound mind, so they can always ask for appointment of a guardian for the same, or apply for an interim measure for protection in respect of any of the following matters, maybe the preservation, interim custody, sale of any goods which are subject matter of the arbitration agreement. So one, they can appoint a guardian for a minor person or any person who is of unsound mind, or they look for the protection of the sale of goods or in the or custody or preservation, because whatever is the matter of dispute, they can always look for the protection of that. Securing the amount in dispute in the arbitration, they can always ask the court to interfere and ensure whatever is the amount of dispute in arbitration is secured. So sometimes they look for a deposit from both the parties. The detention, preservation or inspection of any property or thing which is the subject matter of the dispute. So sometimes they can always ask if detention of particular documents, person, preservation, inspection of some particular property, some particular papers, whatever is the thing which is the subject matter of dispute in the arbitration. So they can always ask the court to interfere and seek this relief from the court. Interim injunction or the appointment of a receiver, they can also ask for a court to appoint a receiver. So the receiver will handle the matter and ensure that the proceedings are handled in a most fair and just manner, or such other interim measure or protection as it may appear to be just and convenient. So apart from this, if there is anything else that is in the eyes of law just and convenient, even that could be asked as a relief from the court as an interim measure. Then section 10 deals with the provision for number of arbitrators. So the parties are free to determine the number of arbitrators, provided the number shall not be an even number. Because when I am talking about the even numbers of arbitrator, it will be difficult to establish the majority. So most of the time, parties can also appoint a sole arbitrator. They are only looking for one single arbitrator, or they are looking for any of the odd numbers of arbitrator. Then what are the provisions for grounds of challenges? So even if we are appointing arbitrator, even if arbitrator has been given the authority as similar to any of the civil court, still there are possibilities that even the decision of the arbitrator can also be challenged. So what are the grounds on which it can be challenged? First of all, the circumstances exist that give rise to a justifiable doubt as to his independence or impartiality. If I am appointing an arbitrator and I have a doubt on his independence or impartiality, or being a neutral third party, or being a rational person, then obviously this is the most valid ground for challenge. Because the person who is appointed is not acting in good faith, he's got some vested interest, then obviously his appointment should always be challenged. Or he does not possess the qualifications agreed by the parties. Many times when you're appointing an arbitrator, as such there are no great qualifications to be appointed as an arbitrator. But the basic rule is whoever is appointed as an arbitrator should have the industry knowledge. So the person should have the relevant knowledge. If I'm talking about a dispute of a software industry, so the person should have the idea of those software industry. Then and only then he will be able to resolve the matter. So when we are appointing arbitrator, normally we come to a consensus term for the person who will be appointed as an arbitrator. If I have a provision for challenge, what is the procedure for challenge? So the section 13 says there are detailed provisions given about the challenge, that failing any agreement to decide procedure for challenging an arbitrator, a party who intends to challenge an arbitrator shall, within 15 days after becoming aware of the constitution of the arbitral tribunal, send a written statement of the reason for the challenge to the arbitral tribunal. Supposedly, both the parties are not able to understand that how exactly they reach to a consensus, they agree that what will be the procedure for which they can challenge an arbitrator. So anybody who is looking to challenge can always apply to the arbitral tribunal within 15 days. And whenever I am applying to an arbitral tribunal, I need to give a written statement in reason saying that what is the reason for me to challenge this arbitrator and what are my valid grounds for doing the same in front of the arbitral tribunal. Then there are provisions for failure or impossibility to act as an arbitrator. So sometimes maybe it is difficulty on part of the arbitrator or the person who is so appointed. So here the section 14 subsection 1 says the mandate of an arbitrator shall terminate if he becomes de jure or de facto unable to perform his functions or fails to act without undue delay due to some other reasons. Mandate is also terminated if he withdraws from his office or the parties agree to the termination of his mandate. So here suppose the person was to be appointed as an arbitrator and he was holding a particular office. The moment he resigns from there, we can always withdraw the mandate. Suppose he is not able to deliver his functions, he's got some disability, some inability, some difficulty. In that case also we can always withdraw the arbitration, because many times when people were appointed, they might have some medical issues, they might have some personal difficulties, they might have some other difficulties. So whatever are the problems the person is not able to perform in the capacity, then obviously we can always withdraw the arbitration. Then what are the provisions for terminating this mandate? And once we terminate the mandate, we'll have to have one more arbitrator, we'll have to substitute the arbitrator. So the mandate of an arbitrator will terminate wherever he withdraws from office for any reason or by pursuant to agreement of the parties. Suppose that he himself is withdrawing from the office, he would have his own reasons, or both the parties agree that we need to withdraw the mandate, or where the mandate of an arbitrator terminates, a substitute arbitrator shall be appointed, because once we are withdrawing one arbitrator, we need to have another arbitrator. So we'll have to withdraw this mandate and obviously substitute with a new arbitrator. Any hearings previously held by may be repeated at the discretion of the arbitral tribunal. Suppose that the arbitrator who was so appointed obviously did some proceedings, some actions were done, some hearings were conducted. So once we are appointing a new person, so this person can continue from where the previous one left, or he can start afresh. So all that depends upon the discretion of the parties and the arbitral tribunal. If they deem fit, they can repeat everything all over again, or they can start from there also, from where the earlier arbitrator left. Then when I'm talking about the arbitration proceedings, we need to be very, very fair to both the parties. So here we have provision for equal treatment to both the parties. So here the section 18 of the Act says the parties shall be treated with equality, and each party shall be given a full opportunity to present his case. Determination of the rules of procedure, section 19 deals with the determination of rules of procedure. It says the arbitral tribunal shall not be bound by the Code of Civil Procedure or Indian Evidence Act. Though we say they can always take references from this Code of Civil Procedure, they can take reference from the Code of Civil Procedures or Indian Evidence Act, but they are not bound by these, because this is an arbitral proceedings they can decide upon on their own. The parties are free to agree on the procedure to be followed by the arbitral tribunal in conducting its proceedings. So basically, being an arbitration, the proceedings are mutually agreed by both the parties. So parties have a lot of say in that. They can agree upon that how do we want these proceedings to be conducted. Failing any agreement referred to in subsection 2, the arbitral tribunal may, subject to this part, conduct the proceeding in the manner it considers appropriate. Supposedly, both the parties are not able to come to any consensus. They're not able to decide that how shall they conduct the proceedings. So in that case, the tribunal can also decide upon the manner of conduct. The power of the arbitral tribunal includes the power to determine the admissibility, relevance, materiality and weight of any evidence. So the moment I'm talking about the arbitral tribunal can decide upon the matter, the procedures, in that it refers to what will be the admissibility criteria, what is relevant, what is irrelevant, what is materiality and what is the weight of any particular evidence. So when I'm talking about admission of any evidence, considering something as evidence, what are the rules for that? All that can also be given by the arbitral tribunal. Then we have provision for place of arbitration. The moment two parties have a dispute, so where we shall refer the matter to. Supposedly one party is from Mumbai and one party is from Kolkata. So where will they conduct the proceedings? So there also they need to have some agreement on the same. So here the section 20 says the parties are free to agree on the place of arbitration. And if they fail to reach on an agreement, the place of arbitration is determined by the arbitral tribunal, having regard to the circumstances of the case, including the convenience of the parties. So obviously, most of the time parties themselves agree on the place of arbitration, that where they want these arbitration proceedings to be conducted. Sometimes they can't come to a consensus. They cannot decide mutually. So in that case, the arbitral tribunal intervenes and the arbitral tribunal gives the directions about the place of conducting the arbitral tribunal. And by giving the directions for place of arbitration, the tribunal will consider the situations of both the parties, merits of the matter, and understand what is more convenient for both the parties. So here the section 20 subsection 3 introduces an option by providing that the arbitrator or the tribunal may, unless otherwise agreed by the parties, may meet at any place it considers appropriate for consultation among its members, for hearing witnesses, experts, or the parties, or for inspection of documents, goods, or other property. So here the section 20 subsection 3 says, if nothing is agreed, then the arbitrators or the tribunal can also decide that where will they meet for consultation, hearing, taking people on oath, witnessing, meeting the experts, or meeting both the parties, inspecting documents, goods, or any other property. So they themselves can also come up with a place and they can decide on their own that where exactly they will be conducting these proceedings. Then section 21 of the Act says, unless otherwise agreed by the parties, the arbitral proceedings in respect of a particular dispute commence on the date on which a request for the dispute to be referred to arbitration is received by the respondent. So when will they commence the proceeding? So whenever a request for arbitration has been received by the respondent, whenever it has been referred for arbitration and the respondent receives a request, then that should be the date from which they are looking to commence the proceeding. Because ultimately when one party decides that I want to go ahead with the arbitration and he informs his decision to the other party for appointing an arbitrator to handle the matter in an amicable manner. So that should be the date from which they are looking to start the proceedings. Then what will be the language of the arbitration? So here the section 22 of the Act says it gives freedom to both the parties to agree upon the language or languages to be used in the arbitral proceedings. This is most common when it comes to handling in a regional language or the international contracts. Because wherever I'm talking about the regional languages, many times people are not really conversant with the English or Hindi language when it comes to India, or if I'm talking about other countries. Suppose if I'm dealing with China, or if I'm dealing with Hong Kong, or if I'm dealing with countries like Canada, Europe, many times they are a little rigid about the languages they speak. So they might not be comfortable with the English language, which we feel as a normal language is generally applicable to all. So they can always come up with their own language in which they want to conduct the proceeding. Supposedly sometimes they're not happy with one single language, because as a Chinese I would want my Mandarin to be conveyed, and as an Indian the other party would want its English to be used. So in that case we can come up with both the languages. So maybe we appoint a translator, so the proceedings are done in both the languages, in Chinese as well the English. The arbitral tribunal, subject to the agreement of parties, has power to determine the language or languages to be used in the arbitral proceedings. Generally, the language is English. So normally if I'm talking about the arbitration proceedings, normally the most common language is English, which is preferred. But obviously it depends upon case to case and party to party. Then we have provision for statements of the claims and the defenses. So here the section 23 subsection 1 says that within the period of time which is agreed upon by the parties or determined by the arbitral tribunal, the claimant shall state the facts supporting his claim, points at the issue and relief or the remedy which he is seeking, and the respondent shall also state his defense in respect to these particulars, unless the parties have otherwise agreed as to the required elements of those statements. Supposedly, whenever I am talking about the claims and the defenses, we need to understand the claimant, the party who is claiming, he has to submit all the facts supporting his claims, whatever are his claims, whatever are his problems, whatever are the grievances he has, and whatever relief he is seeking. So he has to come with a clear, defined outline about all the issues involved and the relief he is seeking. And in turn, the respondent also will have to submit his defenses. That on what basis the respondent feels that he is not responsible or he is not liable or he is not at fault. So he also has to come up with all his submissions and mention it clearly. Then there is a provision of hearings and the written proceedings. So here the section 24 says that unless otherwise agreed by the parties, the arbitral tribunal shall decide whether to hold oral hearings for the presentations of evidence or for oral argument, or whether the proceedings shall be conducted on the basis of documents and other materials. So as I said, this is the arbitration proceedings. The parties or the arbitrators or the arbitral tribunal can always decide upon the course of action, the proceedings, the manner to be conducted, the place, the language, everything. So here again, the arbitrators or the tribunal can always come up with the idea whether they want to conduct these hearings in oral manner, oral arguments, or they want these to be backed by the documents and the other materials. So sometimes they're looking for written material, or sometimes they're okay with the oral arguments also. Then what are the provisions for default of a party? So here the section 25 says that unless otherwise agreed by the parties, wherever without showing a sufficient cause, a claimant fails to communicate his statement of claim in accordance with the subsection 1 of section 23, then the arbitral tribunal shall terminate the proceedings. Because obviously, if I do not have a reasonable cause and I am not able to submit my claim as a claimant, then obviously the proceeding will come to a halt. The proceeding will be terminated. Because as a claimant, I am the one who is seeking relief and I only can't submit my statement, then obviously the proceedings will be terminated. Or if the respondent fails to communicate his statement of defense as per the timeline of section 23, then also the arbitral tribunal shall continue the proceedings without treating that failure in itself as an admission of the allegation of the claimant, and shall have the discretion to treat the right of the respondent to file such statement of defense as having been forfeited. Supposedly, as a respondent, if I am not submitting my defense within the particular timeline, then the arbitrators can always decide whether I should be given a fair chance to submit the defense, or they assume that whatever are the allegations are deemed accepted. So the statement of defense right will be forfeited. Because if I am not following the timelines, if I am not following the procedures, then obviously I am assumed a defaulter. Or a party fails to appear an oral hearing or to produce documentary evidences, then also the arbitral tribunal may continue the proceeding and make the arbitral award on the evidence before it. Sometimes the parties are not able to come up with the oral hearings, or they're not able to submit the documents, because sometimes I say so many things that this happened, that happened, but somewhere the people are looking for documentary evidence of that, something that can substantially prove your claims. If I'm not able to do that, then also the tribunal may decide. So they may continue the proceeding, they may not continue the proceeding, and they can always come up with the award based on the evidences what are before them. So instead of waiting for any further evidences, they can always come up with their own arbitration award based on the evidences in front of them they already have. Sometimes they also seek an expert's opinion. So here the section 26 of the Act says that subject to the agreement between the parties, the arbitral tribunal may appoint one or more expert to report to it on specific issues to be determined by the arbitral tribunal. Sometimes we are looking for some expert opinion. What it could be? The most common example here would be, I am looking to appoint a chartered accountant. Wherever people have some dispute, the first thing that comes to our mind is, when I am dealing with finances, let's understand from the CA. Let's understand from a chartered accountant, because whenever I'm talking about any of the taxation matters, a chartered accountant is the best person to guide us, because taxation disputes are the most common dispute. So people are looking for that. Or if I'm talking about any of the property matters, then we look for a property person who will be evaluator. Or if I'm talking about any of the matters of the bank, or I'm talking about any of the NPA matters, then again we are looking for someone who is an evaluator to understand what exactly is the situation about those goods or those things in the dispute. So we may appoint any expert to submit its opinion, or require a party to give the expert any relevant information, or to produce or provide access to any relevant document, goods, or any other property for its inspection. So obviously, if I'm appointing an expert, I need to give a fair access to the expert. So once we appoint the expert, we also ask the other party to cooperate with the expert. So the other party is supposed to cooperate with the expert in providing the documents, goods, any other property, or any information he's asking for his inspection. Sometimes we can also seek the court's assistance in taking the evidences. So wherever the arbitral tribunal feels, under section 27, or a party feels, with the approval of the arbitral tribunal, they can always apply to the court for assistance in taking the evidences. So they can always seek the help of the court for taking the evidences. Sometimes they feel they are not able to take the evidences, so the party in approval with the arbitral tribunal can always ask the court to interfere and help them in taking the evidences. Then section 29 of the Act says what are the decisions those are taken by the panels of these arbitrators. So the section 29 of the Act says, otherwise agreed by the parties in arbitral proceedings with more than one arbitrator, any decision of the arbitral tribunal shall be made by a majority of all its members. Because obviously, if I'm talking about the panel of arbitrators, everybody has to come to a consensus. So whatever is the decision of the arbitral panel, it has to be done by a majority only. So only we're looking for the odd numbers of arbitrators. So whenever we have an odd number of arbitrators, we can always establish a clear majority. If I'm talking about the arbitration, again we'll have to follow certain timelines, because obviously these proceedings can also not be conducted for infinity. There has to be some timeline to ensure that the arbitral award is just and fine. It serves the purpose of justice. So here the section 29A subsection 1 says that the award shall be made within a period of 12 months from the date of the arbitral tribunal enters upon the reference. So wherever we're talking about appointing an arbitral tribunal, within 12 months, normally the arbitral award has to be submitted. Sometimes there could be a delay, and obviously for the delay, they will have to submit a statement of reason in writing. Sometimes we also have provision for fast track. So here the section 29B subsection 1 says that notwithstanding anything which is contained in this act, the parties to an arbitration agreement may at any stage, either before or at the time of appointment of the arbitral tribunal, agree in writing to have their dispute resolved by the fast track procedures. So sometime whenever the matter is too prolonged, or the parties feel it is not really worth putting in so much of time, money and energy, they can always come up at any stage, not necessarily at the beginning only. They can at any stage, they can always come up, mutually agree that we need to resolve this matter through the fast track procedures. So they can always submit the same in front of the tribunal. Then what are the guidelines for the settlement? So here the section 30 says that it is not incompatible with an arbitration agreement for an arbitral tribunal to encourage settlement of the dispute, and with the agreement of the parties, the arbitral tribunal may use mediation, conciliation or other procedures at any time during the arbitral proceedings to encourage the settlement. So wherever I'm talking about a settlement, the arbitral tribunal also should look for all these means of alternative dispute resolutions, like the mediation or a conciliation or any other proceeding as it may deem fit. Because ultimately, the intention, the purpose of these arbitral proceedings are to come into a settlement, to reach parties a settlement, so they can handle the matter in a amicable manner. I'm talking about an arbitral award, it will have the value as good as a decision of a civil court. So in that case, it has to always be in the writing and signed by all the members of the arbitral tribunal. Because if I have a sole arbitrator, if I have panel of arbitrators, so everybody should sign the award. Then the section 31 subsection 2 says, for the purpose of this section 1, in arbitral proceedings with more than one arbitrator, the signature of the majority of all the members of arbitral tribunal shall be sufficient so long as the reason for any omitted signature is stated. Sometimes it so happens that we appointed a panel of arbitrators, but all are not available or all are not there for the proceedings. So whenever we are declaring an arbitral award, whenever all the parties are signing, so whoever is missing, if they have a sufficient reason cited for them for the omission of those signatures, then the award is binding on all the parties. Then there is absolutely no dispute on the arbitral award. Then we talk about the provisions for costing. So here the section 31A subsection 1 says that in relation to any arbitration proceedings or a proceeding under any of the provisions of this act pertaining to the arbitration, the court or the arbitral tribunal, notwithstanding anything which is contained in the Code of Civil Procedure, shall have the discretion to determine whether the costs are payable by one party to another, or what is the amount of such cost and when such costs are to be paid. So wherever I'm talking about the cost factor, so it is as it is at the discretion of the arbitral tribunal or the court, and they are governed by the Code of Civil Procedure, but they also have their discretion to determine that the costs are paid by one party to another party, or what will be the amount of this cost and when this cost has to be paid. So this is purely at their discretion. They can decide upon these matters on their own. Then the section 32 of the Act says arbitral proceedings can be terminated by the final arbitral award or by an order of the arbitral tribunal. So whenever I'm talking about termination of these proceedings, the most common way of terminating the proceedings is coming up with an arbitral award. So wherever we have an award, announced award given, then obviously the proceedings comes to an end. Or otherwise, if the matter has been referred to the appeal, to the appellate authority, then also the proceedings with this arbitration will be terminated. Then we also have provision for correction, interpretation or an additional award. So here the section 33 says that within 30 days from the receipt of the arbitral award, unless another period of time has been agreed upon by the parties, a party with notice to the other party may request the arbitral tribunal to correct any computation errors, clerical, typographical errors or any other error of a similar nature occurring in the award. Supposedly sometime an award was passed, obviously with the mutual consent of both the parties. Once the award was delivered, after some time, within 30 days, the party noticed that there are some problems, some computation errors, some clerical, some typographical, some technical difficulties, some error which has occurred in the award. Then it can always inform the other party and request the tribunal to do the corrections. Or if it is so agreed by the parties, a party with notice to the other party may request the tribunal to give an interpretation of a specific point or part of the award. Sometime maybe the award was given with the mutual consent of both the parties, but after some time they realized maybe the interpretation could be different. Everybody might take it in a different manner. So they may request the arbitral tribunal, obviously after informing the other party, that we are looking for a clear interpretation of a specific point or any part of the award. So there is no ambiguity in implementation. And generally these has to be done within 30 days or any timeline which is agreed upon by both the parties. Then there are also provisions for setting aside these awards. So here the section 34 says that recourse to a court against an arbitral award may be made only by an application for setting aside such award, according to subsection 2 and subsection 3. So here if I am talking about any award which we are looking to set aside, so here we will have to follow the guidelines of this section 34 subsection 2, that any arbitral award may be set aside by the court only if the party making the application furnishes proof that the party was under some incapacity, or the arbitration agreement is not valid under the law to which the parties have subjected it. Supposedly, if I am looking to set any arbitral award aside, if I do not want it to be implemented and enforced, then what can I do? I need to apply it to the court of law. And while applying it to the court of law, I need to mention few things. First of all, I need to mention that I was under some incapacity, because of which I could not participate in the proceedings, and whatever is the award is really unjust and unfair to me. Or the arbitration agreement is not valid under the law for which it was subjected to. Many times, this is the most common problem when I'm talking about the international agreements. Supposedly, one party is from Singapore, other party is from India. And in the agreement, we agreed that wherever there is a dispute, we will be referred to the court of India. We will be governed by the laws of India. And when the proceedings were conducted, they were done by a Singapore person. So obviously, he followed the Singapore laws. So in that case also, I can always make an appeal and I can ask the court to set this order aside, because the laws were not followed which we had agreed upon. Or the party making the application was not given a proper notice of the appointment of an arbitrator or of the arbitral proceedings, or was otherwise unable to present his case. This is the most common problem. Whenever parties are appointing the arbitrator, the other party does not get the proper notice. Maybe they changed the office, the address was not proper, or the communication was not sent through a proper channel. So in that case also, they can always ask the court of law to set aside the order. Wherever they were not informed properly about the appointment or about the proceedings, or they were not able to be there. This is the most common, but I'm talking about the situation of this corona. Since almost 1.5 years now, people are not able to attend to the matters in person. Sometimes they do not get the communication. Sometimes it is difficult for them to reach there. So these are the difficulties which people have. And wherever there is a difficulty which is proved on paper, the courts do consider the situations. Or the arbitral award deals with a dispute which is not contemplated by or not falling within the terms of the submission of to the arbitration. Supposedly, the award is given which is the outcome of a particular dispute, which was not within the terms of the submission, which was not something that was contemplated within the dispute. So in that case, obviously the award seems irrelevant, and we can always ask the award to be set aside. The composition of the arbitral tribunal or the arbitral procedure was not in accordance with the agreement of the parties. As we have already seen, sometimes the other party was not informed, or even if both the parties were there, one party feels that the procedure or the composition of the tribunal or the way they conducted the proceeding was not as per the agreement of the parties. Supposedly, we thought we'll only have 3 people and they appointed 5 people. Or we thought we'll have all the proceedings in the oral or only in writing, and they conducting otherwise. In that case also, we can always say it was not done as per the agreement of the parties. Then we have the provision for finality of the awards. So here the section 35 of the Act says that an arbitral award which is made under the Act is final and binding on the parties and all the people who are claiming under them. This is just to put an end to the infinity of the dispute. Because if we are not making the arbitral award final, then it will defeat the purpose of this Act. Otherwise, people will keep approaching the court of law, people will keep escalating the matter. So here the Act says under section 35, whatever is the award given by the arbitral tribunal, whatever is the award under this Act is final and binding on both the parties, as good as any of the civil court decisions given. How do we enforce this? So here the section 31 of the Act says that where the time for making an application to set aside the arbitral award under 34 has expired, then subject to the provisions of the subsection 2, such award shall be enforced in accordance with the provisions of the Code of Civil Procedure in the same manner as if it was a decree of a court. So as I am saying, whatever other awards given, arbitral awards are given a similar recognition, a similar reputation of any civil court decree. So wherever these awards are declared and we have expired the timeline to set aside these awards. So wherever we are outside the timeline, we have outgrown the timeline, we have passed the timeline. The time to make an application to set aside the award has already expired, has already passed. In that case, the award should be enforced. And the enforcement will be in a similar manner as of a civil decree. Then we also have provision for appeal. So here the section 37 of the Act says that an appeal shall lie from the following orders. And if I'm talking about appeal, it will not be for anything and everything. Here there are certain restrictions for making an appeal. And the appeals will be from the original decrees of the court. Refusing to refer to the parties to arbitration, or granting or refusing to grant any measure under section 9, or setting aside or refusing to set aside an arbitral award under section 34. So wherever I'm talking about any of the appealable matters, appealable orders, so here under section 8 we refuse to refer to the party to the arbitration. So we are not able to refer it to the arbitration, so obviously we will be looking for an appeal. Or we are not granting, or we refuse to grant any measure under the section 9. Or we are not looking to set aside any matters under section 34. So all these matters, all those, they are appealable. Then we have provision for deposit. So here the section 38 of the Act says the tribunal may fix the amount of the deposit or a supplementary deposit as an advance for the cost which are referred under section 8 of section 31, which it expects will be incurred in respect to the claim submitted to it, provided that wherever, apart from the claim, a counter claim has been submitted to the arbitral tribunal, it may fix a separate amount for deposit for a claim and a counter claim. As we have already seen, supposedly, where I am talking about any dispute, normally for arbitration we are looking for more of a commercial disputes. So wherever there is a dispute, supposedly I am looking to ask from some party a particular amount as my damages. The other party is also asking something from his damages. In that case, what will happen? One is a claim and one is a counter claim. So normally, the arbitral tribunal sometimes fix a particular amount that both the parties should come and deposit this particular amount if there is a claim and counter claim. So both the parties are advised to deposit a particular amount. So whenever we are talking about any of the costs that we are referring to or any of the claims, so normally they ask for a particular sum to be deposited. Then what are the provisions for lien? So here the section 39 of the Act says that subject to the provisions of subsection 2 and to any provision to the contrary in the arbitration agreement, the arbitral tribunal shall have a lien on the arbitral award for any unpaid cost of the arbitration. So whatever is the amount so deposited, the arbitral tribunal will have a lien on this amount. What is the lien? They have a right to keep under their custody. So supposedly if their costs are not paid, whatever are the costs incurred, if those costs are not paid, they can always claim a lien on this arbitral award. So till the costs are cleared, they will not release the amount of award. Then what will be the provision whenever I am talking about death of a party? So here the section 40 says that an arbitration agreement shall not be discharged by the death of a party, either as respect the deceased or as respect any other party, but shall in such event be enforceable by or against the legal representative of the deceased. Supposedly if I am talking about arbitration proceeding, during the proceeding, after the proceeding, one of the party expires. So whosoever is the party who is no more, in that case the arbitration agreement will not come to an end automatically, because again this will be enforceable by or against the representative of such deceased. So obviously the representative will step in the shoes of the party and obviously he will also get it enforced in a similar manner. If we have provision for death, we also have provision in case of insolvency. So the section 41 of the Act says that by a term in a contract to which an insolvent is a party, that any dispute which is arising thereout or in connection therewith shall be submitted to arbitration. The said term shall, if the receiver adopts the contract, be enforceable by or against him so far as it relates to any such dispute. So wherever I am talking about any insolvency term, then again we are talking about any of the parties, whosoever is insolvent. Then the term will be, if we appoint any receiver, it will be enforceable by or against him so far as it relates to any such dispute. So again we will also try to work in line with the receiver whosoever has been appointed to get the relief of the arbitration. So even if the person has been declared insolvent, normally in case of insolvency, the court appoints a receiver. So the proceedings will be conducted giving the regulations to the receiver for the same.